Welcome to the CC CX update, and I promised it to you, two great interviews in January. This is the second of those. I'd like to welcome Sham Aziz to this edition. In case you don't know, and I'm sure a lot of you that follow me do, Sham is a CS and CX professional and LinkedIn top voice for customer service, who has taken and run the operations and strategies for customer care for some of the most loved and well-known brands in the world. In 2023, he made a jump over to his own consultancy, sharing his knowledge and experience in his own way, the CX way. Nice little pun segue there. And we're going to be talking about Sham's journey from Selfridges to self-employed, because I know a lot of you are thinking about that. You're at a point of experience in your career when maybe it's something you're looking at. But we're also going to be talking about how Sham was selecting partners and vendors when he was in charge at Selfridges, because again, I know a lot of salespeople on my network, and they'll be interested in getting your perspective on that as well. So Sham, welcome to the channel.
It's great to be here, James. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No problem at all. So I'll just cover off. We're going to go through the standard format. We're going to go through a few questions. We're going to be talking about the challenges of selecting CX solutions and partners when he was at Selfridges. Then we're going to talk about specific factors that he needed to consider, customer friction, consumer friction as well. And then obviously going on to talk about his business, the CX way as well. So jumping in then, Sham, looking back at your time at Selfridges, what do you think were the unique CX challenges and achievements that you had, with such a well-known and respected brand, where customers, I think we can anticipate, have specific expectations?
It's a really good question, James. Selfridges is known the world over. It never ceased to surprise me how many times I would go to different parts of the world. People would ask me what I do, and as soon as I would say Selfridges, they would say yellow. So it's globally known, even though the physical footprint is only inside the UK. Selfridges is the art of experience, theatre. It's taking retail and presenting it in a slightly different way. So if you then take that experience that people are having when they're calling Selfridges or they're sending an email, they're actually expecting the same thing. And that's quite tricky. That's a really unique situation where if you go into a store, or you go to the cinema on the lower ground, or you go to the skateball on the second floor, or the toy store on the fourth floor, you're going in with a different intention. If you call Selfridges or you send an email, your headspace is different, but you still have the same intention. So whilst I don't want to call it unfair, as a contact center or a call center, you're already starting from, okay, this needs to deliver, be on par with, match that experience that people are getting in person. And so I think that was the unique challenge at Selfridges that I had to tackle over the 7 years that I was there and leading the operation, the customer service operation. And the way that I tackled that was hygiene factors, taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs and actually going down into customer service land with that, and figuring out, how do you get the basics right? How do you make sure you have the right number of people at the right time in the place? There's still so many organizations at this point in 2024 that are still talking about COVID as a reason to why the customer might be left waiting and may not be able to get through to somebody and get some help. And I think that's a short-term way of looking at how to staff a contact center. And so getting the planning right, making sure we're aligned. Alignment is the key word. You can't run a customer service operation if you're not aligned with your brand, your mission, your vision, and your values. And so my role was get the basics right. Make sure that on the contact center floor itself, from a policies perspective, that we're not scoring own goals. We're not doing things that are making it harder for customers. Remembering that as a customer service department, we are a retention tool. We need to make sure that we keep customers coming back, make sure that they're happy. We are not the reason or the barrier to doing that. And so with that in mind, policies can't be own goals. And we, as representatives of the customer, would go back into Selfridges and let the business know that this many customers contacted us. Here's why they contacted us. Here's the positive. Here's the pain points. What are we going to do differently so that we have fewer pain points and more positives? And so using that feedback loop together with an efficient operation, I was very proud and happy to lead a team that was on par with the experience that people were getting in store. Everywhere I go and meet people and they find out that I used to run Selfridges or I was there previously, would tell me a story about a time they got in touch and it was solved. and that's always a good feeling. It's nice, fun memories, and interesting challenges.
Yeah, I think that Selfridges is one of those brands where the anecdotal evidence is going to be out there, right? Because I think, people are interacting with Selfridges, they're getting that different sort of experience, as you said. Therefore, it's going to register, and obviously that presents a completely different challenge for you. Companies where it might be slightly more transactional, and you might not remember every single interaction. Brands you work with every single day, different kind of challenge. And during your time there and what you've just said, so how did you go about selecting partners and vendors? What were the specific factors then that you felt you needed to consider at Selfridges?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I always had this philosophy that as a brand, you need to figure out where you want to play. You need to understand what your differentiation is. So if you are a sneaker brand, then do that. If you are a department store, then worry about experience and theater. If you are a handbag specialist, that should be your focus. That should be what value you provide. You can then figure out, how do I bring on partners and technologies and other things that could complement what we are doing day to day. And so whenever I'm looking for a partner, it was always about how could I find the best at what they do to then complement what we're trying to do. So I wasn't, as part of a customer service operation, trying to be everything to everyone. We deliberately decided not to be in every possible contact channel. We quite specifically looked at what times should we be there. So the olden days of 24/7, everything to everyone in every language, actually at lots of cost, and also perhaps not providing any real value, not just to the business, but to customers. Imagine a contact center where somebody's sitting there overnight and takes one phone call. I mean, I don't know that that's a great job for that person, but also not really providing value back into the business and or to any customers, evidently. And so it's figuring out what's that sort of way to find the right partners. Selfridges itself will type of partner. And so, without making too many weird analogies, it's how do you get through this maze of partners who all would tell you that they want to work with you, who all would tell you they could do kind of what you want almost, and or that they can build it for you almost. And whilst I'm not averse to building, I do think that when you have an organization the size and age of something like Selfridges, you can't just work with anybody. And some of that is because there's a lot of technical debt already in place. And so existing systems, and not all of them are on-prem. Some are, of course, cloud-based, and there's an element of messaging layers and APIs and all these other things that sound like I know what I'm talking about. But it's making sure that you complement what's existing, that you're not coming in and causing a problem, but you're also able to do that in a way that benefits multiple different stakeholders. Always, of course, keep an eye on the end customer. How do we make sure the end customer is going to win? How do we make sure the internal customer, so in this case, in my case, that's the customer service agent, the call center agents, making sure that they win too. And then therefore, when we put in any new technology or partners come in with any sort of systems or processes, that they land well, and that everybody's happy in that case. And then I guess tiny little asterisk, and a very short segue into a short story. The story goes, how much? And the answer usually is, what's your budget? So that there is known as the Selfridges tax. And so those are the types of people I don't work with. And I think if you're going to turn up and you're going to pitch your differentiation, your product, be ready to, with confidence, tell me how much it costs. Otherwise, you might not hear from me again.
I feel you do a really good job at identifying and painting the complexity of the picture that salespeople are approaching. And this won't obviously be unique to Selfridges. Selfridges will have its own unique challenges, but I think any large organization, any department store organization as well, for example, is going to have a similar picture. And technical debt that you talked about there, for example, salespeople needing to be aware of that context and that landscape And I like the honesty of approach as well around, well, how much does it cost? Because it's not dissimilar for me in recruitment. I know there's a lot of recruiters out there that when they're asked what the fee is, they say, well, what are you currently paying recruiters? Well, that's not the same thing, is it? And I think that age of sales, thankfully, has moved on, and I think honesty and transparency wins a lot of business nowadays. So. And actually, that ties into the next thing I was going to ask you, which is really consumer friction. And it's a key element of retaining customers. And like you said, the contact center is a retention tool. So how did you approach that? And were there any partners, vendors, I'm sure there were, that were really helpful in that area of reducing consumer friction for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I might answer the first part by actually talking to how I've gone mind blank. Apologies. Could you rewind and hit me with the question again? The first part of the question.
Yeah, so we're talking about consumer friction and how you went, how important that was in terms of retaining customers, and how you therefore approached it, and partners and vendors that you worked with that really did help in terms of reducing consumer friction for you.
Amazing question. So consumer friction, visible everywhere across the organization, whether that's in the marketing department, trading department, within the warehouse, or in customer service. In my case, I spent a lot of time talking upwards into the business and slowly sharing my knowledge and bringing the exec along on that journey to say, actually, customer service isn't a cost center, it's a retention center. And the way that we can is, one, by dealing with issues when they come through, but two, by taking that information and feeding it back into the organization to drive change. And so therefore that cycle over time becomes not automagic, but almost automatically takes over, and you get into a culture of continuously feeding the organization with information, typically more information than your standard CSAT or your NPS survey, because a contact center will get many more contacts in volume. And so you can get lots more unsolicited feedback that is more direct, that is more emotionally driven than, say, an NPS survey or a CSAT survey.
Yeah.
The second part of the question around people doing it well, there's probably two that are standing out to me at the moment that are really sort of knocking on my door, getting my attention, and I'm really admiring what they're doing in the industry. So the first one would be Surfboard. Surfboard are a workforce management super duper service. And what I really enjoy about what they're doing, they're rethinking the way that workforce management within contact center, call center works. I love their tagline, fairer shifts for agents. And so that's just beautiful. They've gone after a different part of the contact center customer, if you like. They've gone straight to the heart of the contact center, and they're building for the agents in mind. But of course, with that, the business will win if their agents are happy, and then customers will win. And so I think that part of the business that Surfboard have gone after, and then the product that they have and the way that that team works, is amazing. So I'd absolutely say check them out. They're doing good stuff in the right way that I would do it if I was building something like that tomorrow. The second sort of vendor, supplier, team person that I would call out is the team leader community. So a good friend of mine, Martin Teasdale, he's set up the team leader community. It's the thing I think we within the industry didn't know we needed. And actually, the day after it launched and it went live, I was like, oh my God, how comes this didn't happen before? And it took somebody like Martin to build the team leader community and provide a space, not just for team leaders, by the way. Roughly about a quarter of the people in there are not team leaders, but it's people like me who've been in the contact center industry for a long time that want to be a part of it. We want to get involved. We want to pass our knowledge along to that next generation of future leaders who are upcoming and going to do their thing. And of course, we're quite nosy, so we want to grab some popcorn and watch the journey. So yes, I would shout out to the team leader community. Please check both of these guys out on LinkedIn.
There we go, Surfboard and Martin. Yeah, if anyone listening to this or following me doesn't know who Martin is, how? He did a great game show presentation at the CCCX Expo last year as well. It was a lot of fun, and Surfboard as well. I'll put links to both the Team Leader community and Surfboard in the post for this as well. So thank you for that, Sham. So moving on then from Selfridges. So tell us about what you've been doing with your startup business, which is the CX Way.
Yeah, it quite literally starts from what you just said, moving on. So sadly, last year, I was selected for redundancy at Selfridges. I shed a couple of tears, probably a few. And after I'd sort of licked my wounds and figured out where I was going with it, I jumped into action. And I did something that only I guess I could do in the way that I could do it, the CX way, if you will, was I need to get a job. And I came up with this idea that I was going to speak to 100 people in 100 days with a vague end goal of securing myself a role. So I hit the phones, so to speak, but mostly LinkedIn, and leveraged my network. And each person I spoke to along the way, I asked them for advice. I told them what I was going through. And I also asked them a question at the end. Is there anybody else I should speak to? Could you introduce me to somebody? And that's how I got to my 100. I think I went over the 100 eventually. And whilst this at this stage sounds really well thought out and structured, it was quite hit and miss. And I was talking to people on weekends, on evenings. I was talking to 2-3 people a day. On some days I spoke to nobody. But what this process did is it got me speaking to people, and it got me figuring out where I needed to go and what I needed to do. And whilst, of course, my main goal was to find that next role, I very quickly started to get questions. Or, Sham, since you're not doing anything at the moment, could you help me with this one project? Or, Sham, how would you deal with this? Hey, have you ever implemented this system before? Do you know these guys over here? And suddenly I started having different conversations, and I realized quite quickly that I needed to, one, service those conversations in a way outside of just a typical phone call. But two, I needed a vehicle to do that. And that's where the CX Way was born. And so in typical YouTube fashion, which is where I do everything on YouTube, I decided, how do I start my own business? YouTube it. How do I get a website? YouTube it. How do I name my business? YouTube it. And so these sort of steps that I took, whilst they didn't get in the way of me talking to people, which was my main goal, they helped me sort of learn a couple of new tricks. And actually, they were milestones for me. I didn't realize that, but just naming my business, which I could have outsourced, right? But by putting the effort into it, but also it was a tick box where at the end of getting a name, I was able to tick it and say, I did that. And that kept me going in this semi-dark time of redundancy where I'm trying to find a role before Christmas. And so I launched the CX Way. I won my first couple of contracts. I got through Christmas, good news story, eventually. And after sort of, reflecting back and licking my wounds around being made redundant, I now sort of see it as the push that I would never have taken myself. And so I'm glad I ended up where I ended up, and I look forward to expanding more on the 100 people in 100 days. There's a few stories I could tell from that.
I love the simplicity of it. I think there's a lot of hope. There might be sales execs, maybe even the odd trainee recruiter listening to this. I tell you what, you built a heck of a simple BD strategy, and the thing is, you executed it right, and the numbers were about right. And what you're talking about there is something that I think people that I've spoken to who are considering launching their own business, they're not aware of their own value potential. They're not aware of how other people perceive them as professionals, and what happens is exactly what you said. You're monetizing an information stream that otherwise just passes you by. You're talking to people know you're available, they respect you and your experience. They say, hey, you couldn't help me with this, could you? And one thing leads to another, and you never know, any conversation could lead on to something exciting. So that's why you make that next call, that's why you send that next email, you take that next coffee meeting, because you don't know. It's the value that you've built up through your experience, your knowledge, and your track record, and that's something that a lot of people could leverage. And it comes down to, I think your strategy is brilliant. It's very simple, as you said, but going back and then ticking it off, and literally simple things like that, mapping a journey out and taking you from one place to another. I love the simplicity with which you said, I won my first couple of clients, and then there's people going, yeah, but hang on, what about that bit? But then there's obviously more to it. But that's, I think it's brilliant. And so you've gone from, and these are your words, you've gone from Sham at Selfridges and now Sham from the CX way. And you've mentioned, in our conversations, you're continuing to support customers with RFP work now as well. So I think specifically looking at that, how do you approach this differently as an independent consultant versus your internal role? But what does your previous experience with Selfridges bring to the table when you're doing this RFP work now for customers under the CXWay banner?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think independent consultant with a slight asterisk, and I think the asterisk for me is that I'm 22 years from the brand side of the table. And so it's a very different approach to being an independent consultant, where I kind of already know what people like me on the brand side of the table are thinking as recent as October last year. And so it's not that I've been consulting for the last 20 years and the last time I worked for somebody was 20 years ago. It was 2023. And so there's that asterisk, that view that I understand the wants and needs of somebody like me at another brand. If I tail end the Selfridges part of it, an organization like Selfridges and others that I've worked for have a very structured, or most of them do, have a procurement team. And together with a finance partner and procurement team, you have some structure around what it is you're trying to procure. They'll help you with the legal side of that, with the negotiation side of that, although I do like to get involved in negotiations myself, because I understand what I'm buying and roughly how much it costs. But then to jump back over to the independent side of things, there's that way of being able to sift through and know what I know. A great procurement team is really great at many different things, but may, not through any fault of their own, lack some focused knowledge around a particular industry and or service. And if you imagine you're on a website and you're searching for something, if you apply some filters to the left-hand side or the right-hand side or wherever those filters are, you'll get a more thorough search and a laser focus on what you're trying to get to. And that's what I think an independent consultant can offer you. It's different. It's not better or worse, but it's different. And it enables somebody like me to very quickly, as a filter applied, I could narrow down and say, okay, for this type of problem, this is where I think we should go. These are the people we should talk to. Here's the best way to work with these suppliers and partners. We need to be able to give them great requirements. We need to tell them what's a must-have or what's nice to have. And we need to be able to scope. We need to roughly give timelines and figure that out so that they know how they can work with us best and get to a place where we don't fall out when we start talking about money. So how do we sort of clarify what we need, who we need it from, who do we go and ask, and then don't waste anybody's time, both on the brand side, but also on the supplier side of it. Everybody helps everybody get to the right conclusion, which is how do I solve this problem with X solution? And so that's where I think as a consultant, my value lies.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said this to people before, and it's always a pleasure interviewing people in the space. Taking something that is complex and making it sound simple is a very difficult thing to do. But I think you've just done it there in terms of the value of an independent consultant in that space. And I'm sure that's why you're going to continue to go on, and the CXWay will be very, very successful with awards to come and etc. I'm sure. I look forward to seeing it grow. But yeah, Sham, again, thank you very much for your time today. I know the community will get a huge amount of interest and knowledge out of it. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
I really look forward to it, James. I enjoyed today and look forward to round 2.